Yo, hello. A lot of delay today. I apologize. Welcome to the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge Session. I am Eddie Phillips. I am the Erudition Network founder, and we are here every Thursday to go over history and knowledge with you. Um, we had a little bit of a delay today, and I am happy to say that everything is going good now, but just getting in. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving weekend and the end of the week and the weekend. This time of year is always busy for me. I have a birthday falls on that day, and Thanksgiving falls a little bit before that, and then I have my anniversary that comes right after that. So it's always a busy time. But we are here today. And I am it's a lot to talk about. I was trying to figure this morning what I wanted to hit upon this week, and what I wanted to cover. I know that there is so much going on in the world right now. And what we try to do on Erudition is we try to strike a balance with what is current and our history and try to give a perspective on that. Good evening. Good to see you, Pastor Razor. Thank you for watching. This program is designed for people to be interactive, to ask questions. If this is your first time watching Erudition or first time you watch the replay of this, we want you to ask questions. We want you to inquiry about your history, and opine and give your opinion on things that you've been taught or that with the world going the way that it is, with the pandemic and everything that we are dealing with the fear that is out here, with mass shootings, with crime being on the rise. We've covered so much over the last several months to talk about how it affects Black history. Today, I was sitting this morning trying to figure out what we were going to cover and what I really wanted to get into today. And as I was going through several things, a couple ideas hit me. Daniel, good to see you. Good to see you. What should I do to oppose the Rittenhouse verdict? I have refused to say the justice for all part of the Pledge of Allegiance. So there is a point, Daniel, where we have to understand and strike a balance here. And it's some of the things I wanted to talk about today. Today, I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to get to your question, hopefully throughout this hour. We're going to hit that idea several times because that's one of my topics. With the Rittenhouse situation, there's a lot of people being discouraged, feeling like some saying it doesn't even affect me. And last week, I specifically took time during Thanksgiving to do an episode because I wanted to talk about that. I don't believe in the idea that it does not affect us. All of this affects us. You also make a point in here that you refuse to say the justice for all part of the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, the thing with that is that's a promise, right? That's how I look at it. That's my opinion. I see it as a promise. America is based on on ideals, right? That many people don't like to face the fact that a lot of those ideas come from our history, and it's not just American history. We throw a lot onto the Romans, we throw a lot onto the Greeks, we throw a lot onto the European culture, but a lot of the idea of brotherhood, justice, a lot of the ideas of community come from. I have to be really, really honest with you. Comes from the African belief, the tribalism, the kinship mentality, and it also comes from the Native Americans that were over here. Benjamin Franklin himself said that anyone who has been a part of the Native American culture finds it hard to depart from the ideas of brotherhood that it espouses. That's Benjamin Franklin. So if we understand that the justice for all part, the pledge and the idea of being equal is a great notion. Does America live up to that promise all the time? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But we have to hold it to that promise. And that's what we have to do every day. So I believe that you speak something into existence. You say it in faith, because many people have died under oppression with the idea that there is justice, that there will be justice, if not for me, for my progeny, right? So I would say to strike a balance and understand that. But getting back to what I was saying earlier, what I want to do today is I want to question how we learn. I'm gonna put on my psychology hat today, which I don't often wear, right? I usually delve a lot into history and talk about the historical side. But today, as we look at the propaganda, the stuff that's being put out in the atmosphere, I want us to start to look at certain things. I want us to start to see and question why we accept things the way we do, why we believe and go about our lives in the way that we do. Sorry, someone sent me a text, but I really want us to question that. And the first thing I want to talk about is how we process. That's the word, process. I want to talk about the idea of frequency illusion, or what some psychologists call the Baader-Meinhof theory or phenomenon, frequency bias, or whatever you want to call it. But really what it is the illusion of frequency. And I want to talk about how we see these things. So in that particular phenomenon, we are looking at, if you're not aware of it, we are looking at what we see in media, what we see when we study, when we learn, and we pick up something that's new, something that we haven't seen before. And then we start to notice that it seems that it's occurring all the time, right? It seems to us that this thing is always there. Like if you saw the word parallax, and that was the first time you ever heard that word, and then you start to notice that word is used in the news, that word is used in the media, and your mind starts to become more comfortable with it. But not only that, frequency illusion allows your mind, right, to start to focus on that thing, to start to understand it, to break down the walls of understanding. And you start to think that it occurs more, these words that you hear. Recently, me and my son were sitting around and we were watching something, and they were talking about frequency illusion. And I thought about how it is done even in today's society, with cases like Rittenhouse, with the cases of mass shootings. When we use certain words, right, to describe people, we are allowing ourselves to hear that word and to accept that word. The idea of violent, monster, threatening, cruel. These words start to occur to us, and they start to have meaning that is deeper to us, because our mind is now keying to them, right? I hear that word parallax, right? I hear that word social justice. I hear those words, and now it's like I'm hearing it all the time. And now people are saying it to me all the time, and now it becomes something that I pay attention to. Frequency illusion can have a positive and a negative effect. We try to use frequency illusion, or I don't like to say Baader-Meinhof theorem, because that talks about the RAF and the way that the theorists came up with it. So I like to call it what it is. It's the idea of something seeming that is happening all the time, a continual occurrence, as it pierces our cognition and perception. So what does that mean? When we do this show, or when we try to teach Black history, we try to do it in a way where we're allowing you to hear something for the first time. And let's understand something. When you hear it the first time, it's uncomfortable. But now, if someone were to tell you Tulsa, the Tulsa riots, if someone was to talk to you about the People's Grocery, if they were to mention these occurrences, you know these occurrences, and now you say to yourself, I hear this very often. So we want to use that in a positive way, right? We want to use that in a good way. Often the media does not. Often the media uses it as what is code words, right? And we catch on to those code words and we start to have a perception of what is being said, right? And that feeds into something else. Another issue of psychology that I wanted to touch on today that I often see whenever I teach or I talk to someone specifically on here or if in public, psychological anchoring. Now I'm gonna, if these things don't seem important to you, I want you to understand you do these things every day. The Bader-Meinhof, the frequency illusions, you do that every day, but you anchor all the time. Every condition, everything that we learn, everything we see in the media, everything that we see about Black people, white people, those who are deplorable, it sticks with us. It forms an opinion. And no matter what else is shown, our opinion goes back to the anchor that we set before. So in the case of Rittenhouse, whereas we could say, some will argue that it was defense, some would argue that he's a child and he shot, at the heart of me, because of my anchoring, because of the way I was raised, I saw it as a pure case of negligence, parental negligence. But you may see it differently, considering how you're anchored, considering how you see it. A person with a more conservative background would say he had the right to protect himself. A person with a liberal background would say, no, this is a problem, right? You don't have the right to go out and kill anybody. And we are swayed by condition, but we are swayed by what we have set and established in our as we come up, as we grow, as we mature in the way we think. It is a dangerous thing. And the reason why I'm covering it today is it is a dangerous thing, because when we anchor ourselves with with fallacy, sophistry, when we tell ourselves something that is absolutely not true and we hold on to that, we have anchored ourselves with a lie, with a mistruth. And usually that will cause someone to be harmed, hurt. Historically, in the Black community, we have seen this happen a lot. People have an anchored thought that Blacks are violent, criminal, they're sexually promiscuous, right? And you anchor your thoughts into this ideal. And if you've never met a Black person and you watch TV shows and you watch the media and all you ever see is that, then what do you have to reflect on? You go right back to what you're attached to. And you never remove that thought. So everything you do implicitly is still a result of that anchoring until you become aware of it, until you understand the psychological idea of it, until you understand that you as a human being, what you do with that. And unfortunately, it is one of the biggest things that causes racism, bigotry, abuse, because we have anchored ourselves in the idea that someone is secondary, less than, based on some trusted source, grandparents, parents, friends, siblings, schooling. Daniel, I agree with what you're saying. I saw Fox News use the method before, using a video of Biden talking about a Black player that was part of the Negro League, but they edited it to say Negro player. Unfortunately, I like to tell you that these things they're not mainstream, but they've been happening for years. There was a commentator decades ago, very famous commentator, Howard Cosell. And if you go back, and you could probably find it on YouTube, and you would hear Cosell call these football players or these boxers. He's a strong boy. He fights like an animal. He's vicious, right? But when they talk about the white athletes, the quarterback, right? The quarterback was always, the white quarterback was always, he's intelligent. He's strategic, right? He's invincible. He's a warrior. Words have meaning. And when we talk about what we said before, when we talk about the idea, the Bader Meinhof, where you associate that word, and then what you do is you regurgitate that word. So when you refer to players, to people, man, look at that. That boy is a beast. That's beast mode. That guy's an animal. Man, he's going to kill him. And it means nothing to you because I've heard this. I've received it, and now I'm transmitting it. And unfortunately, the transmission of it becomes acceptable. And so everybody starts using that. Several years ago, nobody was calling anybody a thought, right? You never heard these terms such as MILF. But as they get into the public dialogue, right? As they stop being colloquial and they become more everyday, we all start using these words to describe people. And unfortunately, the perception then becomes that this is acceptable. This is acceptable. But we never realize that these words have meaning and they're firing off cognition. Now, you may ask yourself, Eddie, this ain't got nothing to do with history today. But I would direct you to understand that what we do here on Erudition is Black history and knowledge. I spend every Thursday trying to get you to understand something maybe you have not been introduced to. Maybe you never heard until today the Bader Meinhof phenomenon. Maybe you never ever thought about or heard about frequency illusion. That doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is you're hearing it now, and there is no longer an excuse for you to not go study further. Not go study further. Let's talk about another problem of that. Let's talk about something that you may have heard, because again, this goes along with hearing something, knowing this term, but maybe not fully understanding, but it sounds familiar to you, right? But let's talk about something here a little bit different. Let's talk about cognitive dissonance. Can anybody describe to me, just generally, what cognitive dissonance is? Hey, Phil, good to see you. Yes, yes. Because it happens. We just do it because that's what we've heard. If I didn't speak, then I will have no friends. You and me also, brother. Cognitive dissonance. You know, it's a fact. It's a fact that many Americans suffer from cognitive dissonance. We know it in race relations. We know it in just general life. We know it as it applies to the different sexes. There is a dissonance, right? The idea that we have, that the belief systems that we have, that we can't really we can't juxtapose. We can't allow these two things to exist on the same term, on the same relation. And so what winds up happening is that our ideas, our beliefs, our values, the things we love, the things that we hate, they affect us, right? And it's something that we all embrace. Rather, it's how, if you're one of these people who tells yourself that I'm not a racist, I believe in social justice. However, I'm not going to say anything when I see a young black boy or young black girl getting raised by the police, because they must have done something. They must have committed some crime. Even though I stood here and saw that they did absolutely nothing. That car wasn't speeding. They never took anything out of that store. Right? But we have a cognitive dissonance that tells us to rationalize, to come up with an excuse to allow these malfeasances, these evils to exist, these things to happen. And every day in our life, we are presented the idea of having a cognitive dissonance problem. And many of us conform. We conform because it would mean it's easier for us to change an action than to change a belief. I want you to hear that again. It's easier for us to change an action, right, than a belief. Case in point, if I go out here and I say, man, this global warming thing is real. This global warming thing is real. It's bad. But I go out and I buy aerosol cans. I do everything that as if I'm ignoring, because I say, well, you know, they say that this is contributing, but I really like the scent of this. So I don't think my one little can is going to affect that. Little small things, little lies we tell ourselves, and it affects our learning. You read something in a history book, you pick up a book, and you say to yourself, you say, man, I'm reading this, and this says that that W.B. Du Bois was a racist. Now, I know he wasn't a racist. I've done study on him, but I don't want to challenge that in this class. So I'm going to go along with it. Matter of fact, I'm going to write this paper going along with exactly what the professor wants. I'm not going to challenge it. And so this perpetuates the idea of lies, fallacies that go out here. This goes along with everything we just talked about, the anchoring, the Biedermannhof ideas. It all works together in how we learn and how we pick up on the things that I'm talking about, even on Erudition, when we talk about history. If something in history is too painful for you to get your mind around, so you tell yourself, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter what he said. It doesn't matter what proof he provides me. It doesn't matter anything that he said, because in the end of the day, this is about what I feel comfortable with. You know, years ago, when everybody was talking about some of the sexual cases, and I'm just going to be specific, like with the Cosby case. And I remember I watched a pundit, two people, they were arguing, and the guy was like, it doesn't make any sense, man, that you got 80, 60 something people coming out and saying this guy did this, and you're saying that all of this stuff may not be true. And everybody was like, absolutely, absolutely. And I shook my head, and the person that I was sitting with, I told him, I said, see, this is why we fail. Because I'm going to give you something here of cognitive dissonance. The Scottsboro boys, all on the train. White girl says that these black men raped them. The country all co-signed on this idea. Emmett Till was said that rather he whistled, rather he made a suggestive comment to a white woman, he was lynched, decimated. And the society went along with it. The men who killed him even told you how they killed him. Society went along with it. Segregation was the letter of the law in the South, state law. Even though people knew it was wrong, even though people knew it wasn't the American ideal, but they went along with it. People lied about it. Folks got on stands and lied even though they knew that what was done was absolutely incorrect. Because in their minds, they said, well, if this person said it And given what I know of the black person, maybe this is true. So logically, it's nothing wrong with me lying. Even though I didn't see it, we just going to get another dude off the street. And so I was telling this person, I said, so if you tell me that just because a group of people say something, that makes it the truth, that's foolish. Because you have to understand psychologically how people think, what they do, how they perceive something. Cultism. Even when you know it's wrong. Jim Jones took all these people down to Guyana and got those people down there. And when he got caught, when he realized it was all folding on him, he told them to kill themselves. Some wholeheartedly believed. Others didn't, wanted to get away, and they killed them along with them. Poked them with needles and killed them anyway. The idea of dissonance can be so strong. The idea of accepting something can be so strong that you, as Malcolm X said, you forgo your common sense. Malcolm's exact words were, do not be so patriotic that you lose your common sense. Because we do that here. We do that in America a lot. We tell ourselves lies. We tell ourselves things that we should not. Because, in our minds, I'm going along with the society. Now, if you are disinterested in today and you say, well, why are we covering this? I have spent the better part of, I don't know, about 9 months on this program, sharing history, giving information, trying very hard every time we get on to give people something that that's been hidden to them. And I've found recently that many people just can't get it in their heads. I get comments, I get messages from people who tell me, hey man, I hear what you're saying, but I already know all of this. And they go right along, and I watch them in their feeds and everything, and they go right along doing the very things that oppose knowledge of self. Knowledge that can help you and yours to have a better idea of where you are in this world. And so as we sit here today talking about these things, I wanted us to touch on them because I just thought it was so important that we understand why we do it. So when we talk about the anchoring, when we talk about the Baader-Meinhof principle, when we talk about how we take things, cognitive dissonance, and we allow ourselves to be manipulated, it's important. It's important. We watched over the last few years, and I try not to make Erudition political, but this is just what it is. We watch over the last few years how we had people in the government who allowed us to think that the things that they were doing were for the betterment of this country, and they were going to rebuild it. And it goes into another psychological idea here, right? Attraction, arousal. And I don't mean this sexually. I mean this by what people do. The idea, the principle of attraction, right, is that you are drawn to something. You don't know why, but you're drawn to it. And so when you become drawn to it, you start to believe it. You start to say to yourself that everything that is being done, I like it. I like it. It sounds like heaven to me. And even when it's crazy, even when it doesn't make any sense, even when we say to you, when you look back, you may have been attracted. Think about this in the way of a girl, right? You may think, hey, I like this girl. She's so attractive, right? She's beautiful. I love her, right? Or if it's a man, I love that guy. And the initial attraction is so strong that your cognitive dissonance steps in, and you start to ignore the things that your mind is pointing out to you that may be indicators, hey, this is not the person for you. Same thing happens as you acquire knowledge. Am I attracted to this? This is painful. I don't want to hear about the lynchings. I don't want to hear about what happened with Black people and what happened with people of color in this country, because honestly, that makes me feel bad that my people had something to do with it. So I'm going to attack it. I'm not attracted to it. But then someone says, hey, you know what? Let's get rid of critical race theory. Let's stop talking about race. Black people got everything that they need. Brown people got everything they need. They're just a bunch of whiners. Well, that sounds more like what I think, because that makes me feel better about myself. So you know what? I'm going to go with that. I'm attracted to that principle, and I'm going to believe it. I'm going to accept it, right? Even though I know in my gut that what these people are saying is wrong. It just, as they said about the former president, he says the things that I feel. He says what I believe. He says what I want to say. And so I'm going to go along with this idea, and I'm going to follow the law of attraction, right? And I'm just going to keep on moving. And we forget, psychologists, this is what gets me and why I don't like it. We forget that we have a reticular mind, right? We have a structure in our mind. It catches everything. And it can believe anything. That's why you have mass shootings. That's why you have serial killers. It can accept things that us will be like, that is illogical. But give it enough push, it will do it. Give it enough persuasion, it will accept it. Give it enough action, it becomes common. The other part of that we need to talk about is similarity. We are attracted to those things, to those people and things that are similar to us, similar background, similar culture, similar religious belief. Something about that person inspired. I like them. They seem to be just like me. That's not a bad thing. None of these things can be bad. It's just that you need to be aware of it. Why do you detest to hear certain things? I remember one time my wife told me, she said, you know, as a kid, she didn't like hearing about Black history because it was always so painful. The human mind runs away from that. That's just a logical thing to do. Nobody wants to dwell in pain. Nobody wants to dwell in terror. Nobody wants to, but at the same time, even though you want to repel from that, you still need to learn. Because if you don't learn, you allow yourself to fall back into a trap. You become blinded to a trap that your ancestors gave you the solution for, but you just didn't pay attention to. So all of these things play a part. They play a part that we have to be mindful of. And so I told myself today, as I was getting ready to do this episode, and I said, you know, we really got to talk about how we learn, how we pull in information, and how we accept information. And why is it that so many of us run away from Black history? Why is it that the society tells us that we don't want to talk about those things? Why is it that we have our own people in our own culture, people with darker skin and lighter skin than me who are Black, will tell you, we shouldn't be talking about that. That's old. And we fall into this trap, into this pit. And we have a dissonance. We tell ourselves, it's okay because I'm doing well. My family eats every day. I was able to get a job. I was able to go to school. And we ignore the fact of these young kids that we see out here who are in homes that they're abused. We ignore the fact of the war on drugs that locked up Black fathers. we ignore the fact that that locking up of black fathers caused black women to be super women. And a lot of them had babies at young ages and were forced to raise these children by themselves. Or if they decided they weren't going, gave those kids to the grandparents. And so it's so easy for you to have a dissonance and lie to yourself that this whole thing doesn't have anything to do with me. Now let's get into that Rittenhouse thing. I've heard many of my brothers and sisters out here say, and I heard Daniel talked about it earlier, say that, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's the way that the law is. This is the way that the system is. But as I said last week, if you watch my episode from last week, and I said a lot of people aren't going to like the idea of what I said, but it's truth. It does matter with us because in a lot of ways, we have allowed the system. We have actually paid into and added cogs to this system. And you say, well, how is that? Why you say that, Eddie? Well, I'm going to tell you why. I remember when Barack Obama ran for president. I remember twice. And I remember when Hillary Clinton ran. And I remember having to hear black people say, you got to get out there and vote federally and locally. And I remember my brothers and sisters, some famous, some not, getting out here saying, it doesn't matter about our vote. Doesn't matter. And what happened was when Trump got in office, they put judges. They've stacked it. If you go back and you look at some of the judges who have been over these cases, these high-profile cases, and you go and you look at when they were put in as judges, you see how your vote affects what you do. How I teach my sons, my wife does too. We sit down, we look at the ballot, and we go in and we say, well, what does this person did? Who is this person? Because when you start putting judges on seats, and as you saw with the Rittenhouse case, judges who have the authority to say, this is not important, and throw it out. Judges that can say that a young white man can molest women and that putting him in jail, right, would mess up the rest of his life. And to be bold enough to say that. And you go back to some of the cases that I just mentioned earlier, right? Some of the cases that I mentioned earlier, like the Scottsboro boys, right? You say to yourself, how has times changed? They haven't. They haven't. And this is our ancestors fought. And that's the one reason why a lot of our ancestors fought so hard to vote. Some died because they understood the importance of having your voice heard. How are statutes and laws written and manipulated in the court to allow cases like the Scottsboro boys, the Central Park 5, the Martinville 7, right? How do these cases happen? They do not happen in a bubble. They happen because a lot of us forego the idea that what we do right now, today, is important for tomorrow, even if you're not here. So when I watched the Rittenhouse case, oh, cool. I got you, Daniel. We will look into it. You have to tell me what president you're talking about. When you look at these cases and you start to understand why they're thrown out and why people are getting away with the things they get away with, then you start to say, well, it very much affects us. It affects us too, because now there is precedent. Law works with precedent. Lawyers argue precedent, right? So now there is a precedent on the book that a 17-year-old can walk out there with a weapon at any rally that opposes something that they don't like, and they can walk out there with a weapon, a machine of death, loaded. And if someone moves aggressively, or anything that is threatening to them, they can blow those people away. That affects Black people directly. And it goes along again with the idea of what we convince ourselves, what we tell ourselves, what the media tells us, what we share with each other. And because we don't fight against the theory, because we don't buck against the group, because we don't say something to stop the tide, the flow, the negative flow, what happens is we all fall into these cults of understanding. And we tell ourselves, okay, well, that's not that important. But it is very important. Abortion, overlooked tragedy of American Representative Walt Blackman, a ratio of 474. I don't know what you're talking about, Gloria. 1,000 live births. Black women have the highest ratio of any group in the U.S. You have to give me what your point is on that. I'm willing to talk about it, but I don't know what you're trying to state right here, other than a cut and paste copy that you put on here from where I don't know. We have to be able to understand why we're doing what we're doing. Gloria's just talking about abortion. That's a big issue going on right now. And I think what she was saying in this thing here, Black women have the highest ratio. But I'd ask, where is that study done from? No, what I'm saying is, I don't know what your point is, what you're asking me, or you are sharing with me. I know what abortion is. I understand an abortion has been around since time immemorial. I know that this has been an ongoing thing throughout the course of human existence. I know that the birth rate of Black men and Black women is substantially in the negative as far as how we survive. I know Black boys die almost 80 times more than any other demographic. I know that, and I'll share those statistics with you. I know all that to be a fact. So when you say that a ratio of 474 abortions per 1,000 live births, let's remember our history. Let's remember in the South what happened with Fannie Lou Hamer. Let's remember how when Miss Hamer said that Black women will go into the hospital for gallbladder surgery or a simple procedure, and that they would give them a hysterectomy. Let's remember that there was a fear in the South of having your babies delivered in certain hospitals because you didn't know if the baby would make it. Let's understand that after toward integration, there was fear, and that it's an actual fact that the birth rates in the Black community dropped. Now, I'm not giving you a Google stat. I'm not pulling anything to you. I'm telling you that if you are going to associate abortion with a culture, with a race, you better understand the full facts. Why would that matter? That's like me asking you, did you vote for Donald Trump? Why does that matter? It probably would behoove you to understand that I am neither a Republican nor a Democrat. I'm a registered independent. I'll tell you that very honestly. Politics has no meaning to me in that, because I do not I understand. If you go, as a matter of fact, I'm going to put on here at the end of this, there's an article I wrote called Foxes and Wolves, and it will give you an understanding of how I feel about that. Because I'm going to tell you a little thing, and I'm glad, Gloria, I'm glad you're engaging. I really am. But let me give you a fact here. One of the biggest problems in our culture is that we try to hide everything between a conservative and a liberal mentality. And we do that with the idea that you can't be, you just because you're conservative, you got to be racist. And because you're liberal, you got to be accepting. And that is a lie. History shows us that to be a lie. If it were not a lie, more changes would have happened in this country so far. Why is it in this country we can see Black men and women beaten, assaulted, and killed in the street, and have liberals in high office and very few laws, statutes, or anything comes about to stop this systematic killing? The reason being is because it does not benefit them as a system to change the process. That's what it is. So we can hide behind politic, right? But the truth of the matter is it comes down to humanity. The idea of, do you care about those people around you? So throwing these statistics out doesn't do anything if you don't give exposition, if you don't give something to actually talk about what you're saying. Not at all. Not at all. Black genocide is not just now. I would ask you to go back and watch the program for the last 8 months and look at what Black genocide is. Not just about abortion. Black genocide is not just about the willful abortion of a person. Black genocide comes from what we're taught, which what we talked about today. Black genocide comes from things like trait transfer, right? When we attach negative things like this, and we say that Black people get more abortions than whites, and we put that transference out there, and somebody is going to believe it, and they're going to regurgitate it to somebody else, and it goes on and on and on. I've said this to you before on here. You can ask us anything, but come with facts. And I believe the last time you did that, I gave you an entire episode and I counted your facts. I don't know if you watched it. I counted everything that you said because I believe that that's important. We do not allow people just to come on and spout rhetoric. We don't deflect. I've told you several times, even in this broadcast over the last few minutes, that we just need to know what you're talking about. We're not going to go down a rhetoric hole, a rabbit hole. And we're not going to sit here and tell lies and fallacies that are not supported by facts. And that's all I have to say to that. I wanted today's show to spend some time and not necessarily go through a lot of history, even though we always touch on some history on this. And I know we've hit some historical facts on here. But the biggest thing today is kind of what Gloria is showcasing right here, right? What you're showcasing right here. The dead remain dead. They can't be brought back. 360,000 Black babies were dissected in the womb and still. So let me explain to you what the value of that is. Why are these babies that you're talking about, that you provided no study, no statistics, why are these babies dead? Why is there less value on black lives? Where did that come from? If you don't know your history, if you don't spend time knowing what your ancestors and your relatives went through, if you lie to yourself thinking that only today affects what's happening, you're living in delusion. You're living in delusion. You can spout 1 million babies, 500,000. You can tell me 1 million babies have been dissected and killed. You can tell me whatever you want to tell me. But then I want you to look and actually go look at the national statistics, and I will share that with you on birth rate numbers, which I've covered before in one of our other programs. And I'll give you that link too. I do not live and I do not support sophistry and derision. I do not think that that is the proper way to learn. I do not go and pull a Google ad or some conservative talking point. That's lunacy. I take firsthand history from the source. There are books, Gloria, that are written that talk about what Black women went through when they were stripped of their babies, when value of Black life only was as much as they can push and pull. When the Essential del Negro was put out to enslave. When laws were passed in this country that said anything that came out of that Black woman's womb was subject to the master. The Black woman. And it was written that way so that he could rape and kill and do whatever and abuse a Black woman. So you can give me whatever you want to say here. But when you ask me why we care about what happened in the 19th century, 18th century, we need to know where it started to even know where it's going and how to end it. And too many of our people don't know. Too many of our people are following, as I just told you, the law of attraction, the belief of what sounds comfortable to them. So you get into the cognitive dissonance. I'm reflecting on what we talked about today, of throwing out talking points that are irrelevant because they do not go to treat the problem. They just dictate that there is a problem. Part of the reason you have Black women getting abortions more than anything is because we have conditioned ourselves to seek pleasure instead of providing fruitful offspring. Okay. Just on my words are not misconstrued that I'm saying it's because we are seeking pleasure, not knowing that the human anatomy is created to breed, not just please. We have this problem. So I'm gonna spend my last 5 minutes. Teddy, those are good points. Those are good points. I'm going to spend my last 5 minutes talking about some of that, because I know me and you had a conversation recently, and we were talking about this, right? The misassociation of arousal, right? And I want to talk about that because I think that that's a part of this arousal. It is found psychologically that when a person is involved in something stressful, something that is bad, they become aroused. Now, I don't say sexually. They become aware, hypersensitive. We call it arousal. And what happens is, going through that arousal, that excitement, that issue, what happens with people is that they're at a heightened state. And I like to look at it like we look at the ghetto, right? Look at violence and gangs and all this other stuff that we see out here. If a person is surrounded by violence and stressors all the time, right? What happens is when they come out of that, they're in a state of arousal, in a state of arrest. And what happens is the first sensual, kind, soft, caring event that happens to them, they start to what is the word? They start to feel comfortable, and they allow themselves to get this false sense of attraction. This happens in the Black community a lot, with young men in stressful homes, rejected values. And what happens is they find, and women too, and they find themselves attaching themselves to the first thing that makes them feel good, feel well, feel happy. And unfortunately, it produces children in a relationship that had false attraction, false arousal. But it's too late at that point. And now we have a whole bunch of children having children. So there are many psychological conditions with that. Gloria, you pretend that you don't understand babies are not being players. Now mothers are voluntary offering their children in the back. I'm gonna ask you again with your lunacy, because this is lunacy, to provide us with a source before you just say something off the top of your cuff. Give me a site, source, study, something. I don't know if you know this, but Erudition gets a lot of people every week that watch the episode. They really do. And so maybe you think it's non-existent. The word, as I told you earlier, and as we talked about with the Biter Manhoff, I think you probably came in late. It's just to get the word out there. We drop it out there so that once you start to hear it more, I don't care who you hear it from, it resonates with you. That's called knowledge. That's called passing knowledge, for good or for bad. And this is why I challenge when you put rhetoric out here that has no source. And I want you to interact, but I want you to provide something that's not just randomized statements of derision. Thank you. Well, we're coming down to this hour, and we actually started late. So we're at an hour, and I have to be able to get on off of here. We will see you next week. I do appreciate everybody who came on and interacted. And I ask that you share, so that people out here can be better informed. And I thank you again. And I hope to see you next week on the next interactive program. But until then, I hope that you have a blessed rest of your week. And I hope that there was some knowledge today that was provided that illuminated you and helped you to better understand how we perceive and how we gain knowledge. Until next time, we will see you next week. Thank you.